So we're back on the Pontiac today, and this morning pulled out the engine and transmission since I think that's all we really need that for at the moment. We're still going to pull out the brake booster and that. But what I want to do is fill most of these small holes in the firewall. So if we don't think we're going to use them, I want to get rid of them. So that's just going to be below that line where the seam is. Fill all these up, tidy up whatever needs to be done in here, and then we can start doing the final fit on the floor pans and get this thing buttoned up. So you can see I've just pulled everything out. So I want to seal everything up, and it also gives me a lot more room to work in here. So there's a lot of little holes and pinholes I want to fill up, but I'll finish pulling the rest of the stuff out, mark what needs to stay and what needs to go, and we'll start from there. Don't know how well you'll be able to see this with my poor lighting and camera skills, but got the two Yada heater holes filled. A couple holes filled over there. I need that hole for the bolt for the throttle pedal, electronic throttle pedal. And I think what I'm going to do over here is, this is rusty, but we'll clean that up. I think I'm going to make something that bolts on here, because this is where the slave cylinder, or the master cylinder for the clutch was, because this was a manual car. So I think I'm just going to make a plate to cover that hole that bolts in case he ever wants to switch it over to a manual in the future. But we're going to leave that open for now. And I also did some work inside the car to weld up, in a sense, this area here. So that's all taken care of. So I'm pretty good on this side. And now I'm going to fill some holes on that side. As you can see, got two here, a little one there, and a little one over there. So we'll fill those up. I'm not sure where the heater hoses are going to come through for the AC system to the engine, but we'll fill those up now, and we can always put them where we want later. Well, I keep learning and getting better every day. So I got that little hole filled. I got the two holes that were used for the AC lines, and no idea what that hole is for, but it was a hole that we're not going to use. So I think I've got the firewall about where I want it now. We use that big hole over there to run wires through. And we use that big hole over there to run wires through. Again, we'll cap that for the master cylinder clutch. And that, of course, is for the brake. So now the front part of the firewall is done. And now what I want to do is go on the inside, which I'll show you here in a minute, and piece that all together so it's all one piece. So as you can see on the upper portion of this, I guess you'd call it the transmission tunnel support, I had to make all these little pie cuts to get it to bend the way I want it to. What I think I'm going to do now is sit in here with a welder and some sheet metal and fill in all those little pie cuts and grind them down. Lots of fun work. So I went through and cut little pieces and welded seams, smoothed out the edges. So now we've got the transmission tunnel mount upper section all done. So if we want a body work we can, but that'll all be covered with stuff. So not too worried about it at the moment, but just another thing checked off the list. You've now entered the Klecko and Clamp Forest. So I spent a little bit yesterday and about half a day today getting everything all fitted nice for the two floor pans and the two little pieces back here that hold the floor pan to the tunnel. So everything's fitted nice. It sits nice against the tubing and against the original sheet metal up here. And I just left this long, not long, but sitting on a little bit so that once everything is welded in, then I can tap this and get it sitting against the original rocker and the Pontiac. Same thing on the other side. Probably can't see them, but there's little holes in there. But yeah, everything's good. So now I've got all my fitting done. I'm going to go through and finish grind everything up on the back side and go ahead and hit it with a coat of etching primer. Well, we got the black, hopefully it shows up, etching primer on all the surfaces of the car. And we got the black etching primer on the bottom side of the floor pans and the little closeout pieces. So we'll let that dry for a while and we'll tack those in place. Well, that's how I spent my morning. So I got both sides fitted so you can see the passenger sides all holed up and cleccoed in place. So on this side, I started out on the driver's side and did all the plug welds, just started here, worked my way this way, kind of in this direction. Just did some seam welds along the side. And I put plug welds in here, so just got a couple tacks on top. And welded a little bit from the bottom, but I think we'll do a little grinding on that in the future. I don't feel like grinding right now. We'll do some more welding. We'll grind that up and then go back and patch anything that needs to be patched. And then we'll probably seam seal along the front edge there and along the side. But yeah, turned out well. Well, we're on the passenger side. We've got this all welded in. So all the closeouts are done, all the plug welds are done, and now it's just grinding. It's getting late in the day. I'm just trying to figure out if I feel like grinding or not. So, but either way, we'll get to grinding here in a little bit. So the owner came up this past weekend, Mr. Bubba, and we spent some time mocking up doors. This, of course, is the driver's door. It fits really good. I was surprised with all the cutting and welding we did, but actually measured it with a micrometer, and top to bottom gaps are basically equal, within 6 or 7 thousandths. We're a little tight in the back, but we can fix that. Then the biggest change is he went out and found an early front end. So this is what we're going to run on it, is the early Vega front end. But we'll make a simple change in the grill so it mocks the one that they had on early Astres. So this is the passenger side, of course. And this is where we spent way too much of our time. So I put new bushings, and I actually used shoulder bolts in the doors, and we could not get anything to line up correctly. We thought it was maybe the body's twisted, but if the body twisted, the driver's side would be bad. And lo and behold, I don't know if you can even see it. Smaller there, bigger there, sticks out all the way around. I actually have a bolt that's an 1/8 inch small in the upper part. Huge gap here. This is down about an 1/8 of an inch or quarter of an inch. And first thing we found out is the weld here to hold the skin to the inner had broken. But I think what we're ultimately coming up with is the hinges were never welded on correctly at the factory. So we'll have to tackle that when we get to that point. Well, it's Wednesday. We've been working a little bit on this passenger side rear floor pan. So it's been up over here and along this edge and this side edge gets bent down and it's just laying on top of the bar. So we got it all clearanced for the tube, and it's fitting pretty good. Took a little bit, but that's okay. Tried to make it all in one piece and was successful. So now we'll do some trimming on it, put some holes in it. Same thing with the front one. I just got to put the holes in the under seat floor pan, and we will go from there. So here are the two floor pans, passenger side, underneath the seat, and the back footwell, but there's no rear seat. So get everything all drilled and put a couple holes in to weld it to the bar. Clearance for the seat mount. So everything's looking really, really good. You can see on this one it's all kinds of crazy. So we got this bent up to attach to the tube that goes along the transmission tunnel, and this goes along the back. And when you flip it over, that goes against the passenger side rocker panel tube along the back wall and along that angled down tube. So most of it's fitted really good, so I'll weld it around, and once we get it nice and solid, then they'll bend these tabs in place and weld those in. But besides that, I'm going to check them one last time and give them a nice coat of paint, primer, and then we'll let those dry and weld them in. I made a little progress on the driver's side under seat area. So we have this all mocked up along with the channel that the brake line and fuel line can run through. So I've got about 5/8 of an inch between this tube, which hopefully you can see, and the inside of that. So that should be enough to run brake line, fuel lines through. And these pieces here are just not chopped off yet. I always leave things a little long. Mark them off and cut them off later. But yeah, everything fits. And I'll come along here and weld this piece to this piece and this piece to the gold piece right now. But yeah, we're happy with that. And now we'll start on the pieces you can't see, because they're not here yet, but those two back pieces. So we'll probably do the same concepts we did on the other side and just make up some pieces to go in there. And there you have it. We have the driver's side below the seat and below, I guess, where the rear seat passenger's feet would go, but there's no passenger seat, so everything is in there very nicely. You'll be able to weld along here. Actually, there's plug welds in here. Do some welding along that edge, but everything else is really, really good. So we'll clean this all up. I got all the holes in for the plug welding, but we'll clean this all up and get some primer on the bottom and clean up the rails and get those all set for primer too. So what I'm working on now is we have this trough that's built into the driver's side floor pan. The pieces are out drying right now, but I need to pass it through this 2x3 tube. So what I think I'm going to do is I played with a piece of 2x2 and I settled on a piece of 1x1, or 1.5 by 1.5 rectangular tubing. It's probably 1/8 inch wall. I'm going to pass that through here, weld it in place. I'm also going to weld inside here to add some more strength to it. But pass it through here, weld it in place, and bring it out flush with this surface. So basically be right there so we can bring the wires in, or the wires, maybe some wires, but brake lines and fuel lines. Bring them through here. I was thinking I could 3D print a little holder that you can run the lines through, and it'll just sit in that tube and it'll come out the other side. So this is the back side of that tube, as you can see. And what I plan on doing, besides making a lot of noise, is I kind of drew out my location here. So what I'll try to do is, unexpertly as possible, is drill 4 holes all the way through this tube so I have a location, and then I'll come into the plasma cutter and cut these lines. That'll give me a rough guesstimation to put my 2x2 or 1.5 by 1.5 tube in. I was originally used 2x2, but that's why I keep saying that. But 1.5 tube through there, cut it off flush with the back, and we'll have our pathway. Well, we got about 4 holes drilled in from the back, so they just touch the lines that I drew, and then I drilled those all the way through to the front side. So I'm going to go to lunch. When I come back, I'll got the plasma cutter all set up. I'll buzz those out, get it close on the back side, and then I'll rough in the front side. Well, I really like my little portable plasma cutter. So I just burned the holes from both sides. I went a little bit inside of them and just kept going round and round and making the sides straight. As you can see, I got that tube exactly where I wanted it. So it's flush up here, so I can weld that. Then I plan on coming along here. I'll enclose this with a plate, cutting around it, and then welding it on the sides. So, yeah, I think it's going to work really well. It's hollow, and the fuel lines and the brake lines should pass through there nicely. This is where I started back on the back side, so you can tell, leaves me just enough room to weld those together nicely. So I think I'll chop this off close and weld it, grind everything up, clean everything up, and weld it in place. Well, got the front all burned in. I welded inside on 3 sides, the sides and the bottom. Did a little welding on the outside and the bottom of the main 2x3 tube there, or 3x4, whatever it is. And then I just tacked the 1.5 by 1.5 at the top and the center and at the bottom. And again, we'll put a plate around that here in a little bit, either today or tomorrow. And this is what it looks like from the back. I'll let it stick out a little bit just so I can weld it good, but weld it all the way around it. Keep it nice and watertight. And now I got to figure out what's the next thing to work on. Well, I got everything done I wanted to get done today. So I got the area under the driver's seat, little area welded there, little area welded there. Hit it all with a wire wheel, everything that was going to be covered. Hit it with isopropyl alcohol to clean it off, and got it with the primer. And I did the same thing on the passenger side. So all that I have to do now is make little plates on both sides to block off those kickers, weld those in, and we'll be ready to put the floorboards in tomorrow morning. Well, as you can see, got the little caps on, and I ran out of black primer, so I used gray. But driver side one's in, passenger side one's in, all ground up and cleaned up. So now I'm going to turn the fan on, let this dry for a couple hours, and after lunch we'll come in and try welding some floor band in. Well, everything's ready to weld now. So like I said, I primered everything. Once it dried, put the floor pans all back in, and then I have a gold Sharpie that shows up good against the black and the gray primer. So I marked where all the holes were, took everything back out, took a wire wheel to all those, cleaned everything up so I got good bare metal, and vacuumed everything, and put the clecos back in. So now, I think everything's ready, so I'm just going to hit the major parts where it's tight, and then come back, tap along the edges to get everything, the corners nice and tight, and then we'll finish all the rest of it, because you can see some of that sticks out, but it won't when we're done. And then I got a couple little gaps I got to fill with some sheet metal and things, but yeah, we're all ready to weld. Well, I got all the welding done on both sides, but I started grinding on the driver's side and forgot to tell you guys about it. So, yep, everything's welded top and bottom, welded along the seam on both sides, along the top, and now I'm just grinding the best I can. Certain areas you can't get to the spot welds, but it'll work. We'll seam seal it up and it'll look really good. So I'm happy with the side. Now I'm going to go over to the passenger side and do some grinding on the top over there. Well, I got the passenger side floor pan all ground good enough for what it is. It's underneath the seat and underneath carpet and underneath sound deadener, so it's nice and smooth, good enough for what it is. So we'll seam seal it. I've got a few little spots that I want to fill up some holes on, but we'll do that later on. But now you can see from the firewall on both sides we have floor pans all the way back to the back. So that'll conclude this episode. I'll put this together and post it, and then we will decide what is the next major fun thing we get to do.